Okay, good evening everybody. I'm Kit Jansen, and tonight I'm going to tell you something about my certification journey. And basically my presentation comes down to that there's more than one way to get certified. What I'm going to talk about tonight, short introduction about myself, also a point that Miriam already discussed and Kanan as well. Why would you get certified? What helped me on my journey? How do you familiarize yourself with the content? Tools that I've used for the familiarizing myself with the content, and knowing when you are ready to take an exam. Some tips about taking the exam itself, and some resources I've used. How to familiarize is more like the methods, and tools is the resources, the things I actually use to do it. And last, some Q&A. So who am I? Well, I'm Kit Jansen. I've been working with Salesforce for about 3 years now. I'm 17 times certified, and so far all on the first attempt. I've not as many badges as Miriam, but well, quite far along with 250. And before I started working with Salesforce, I already had experience with CRM, because I was at the CRM team of University of Twente as a functional administrator, doing mostly data quality control and some reports and dashboarding for the strategy and marketing department. And I'm a bit of a jack of all trades. I like how the full saying goes, jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. Because I might not be great at any one particular thing, but I'm good at quite a lot of them. Not just in IT with my job, but also with hobbies. I like photography, cooking, stuff like that. Also a bit of martial arts like Miriam, rugby. But before you think that, a lot of certifications, a lot of trail badges, that you think I'm a great student, I also was enrolled for 2 bachelors at university, and I finished neither of them. So you don't have to be a good student to be successful in their Salesforce job. So, like I said, why would you get certified, and especially this many times? A few points, some already mentioned by Kanan and Miriam. It can be a great entry point into the Salesforce ecosystem. If you don't have the experience with CRM or any other IT platform, some certifications will really boost your CV to get into the Salesforce ecosystem. And the same way it can fix or compensate for gaps in your CV. Like I said, I didn't finish either of my bachelor degrees. So my CV was a bit lacking when I started out looking for a job in, I think, 2015. And it was quite difficult actually to find something. After about 2 years at my previous employer, also a Salesforce partner, I switched to my current employer, Integris. When I went applying for jobs, it was so much easier because I had just done 5 certifications in 9 days, and that completely compensated for the fact that I had no bachelor degree, because I put it at the end of my CV and thought I was just going to read over it because I see all the certifications first, and that worked very well. It's also a great way to boost your career. I did 9 certifications last year in about 2 months, and that worked out quite well for my job. It also makes you better at your job. Like Miriam already said as well, if you pass the certification, you feel more confident. A bit arrogant maybe, but you think you own the room. When if you're in a meeting with a customer, you can confidently discuss these features, this functionality. And it also makes you more employable. It's not just one role you have to do. It's not just Service Cloud or just Sales Cloud, but you can cover all the clouds, and that makes your job much more varied, and in my opinion much more fun. And also it's a great way to boost your partner status as a Salesforce partner, especially if you're a small company. So what helped me on my journey? First of all, take ownership of your certification journey. Also, something Miriam already mentioned, who's going to pay for all this? I at least fronted all the certifications myself and paid for most of them myself, and just negotiated a better pay afterwards, instead of having the certificates themselves compensated. And that way you can really follow your own path. I don't do certifications when somebody asks me to. I just do them when I want to do them. And that way I can decide which direction to go in and also how I want to go there. I just follow one straight line, but I take a certification here and there, and sometimes I do nothing for half a year, and then a whole bunch of them in a row. And yeah, by taking ownership of your own journey, it's a great way to do that. And also works well for me, because I don't have to, I'm not that good at following instructions. People tell me what to do, I don't like it. So like I said, it's a great way to focus, to work towards a long-term goal, but at the same time you can take side tracks and take a break in between. You don't have to keep going at it in one straight line. Something that's also really helpful for me is that I have a very wide range of interests. I find quite a few things I'm interesting, a bit of the jack of all trades again. And it's great to find parallels, to find context with features. And it's also a point I'll get to later, it's practices everywhere. If you buy something at an e-commerce website like a web store, smart suggestions, it might teach you something about Commerce Cloud. If you call Ziggo because your internet isn't working, you're an end user in a service process. And all these things kind of give you context, can make you better consultants, like what to do, what not to do. And for me, this right here, this presentation, is also training for me. I want to do CTA as well, the Technical Architect certification. And for that you have the review board, where you have to present your architecture you came up with within 2 hours. So it's a great way to be in front of a group and know how to present. So practice everywhere. And another one is pre-sales and architect roles. If you work on projects, it's usually 1, 2, 3 or 4 projects maybe at a time, but you don't work for tons of customers. And quite often you are put in one role most of the time by your employer, so you're a developer or a consultant or an architect, but you're not all of them at the same time. And it helps if you do sales as well, sales architecture, a bit like Miriam does with solution architecture, because that way you come across so many more projects. It's instead of just 2 or 3 customer cases, you maybe have 50 in a year or even more than that. And that way you come across so many more requirements and therefore so many more solutions. So how do you familiarize yourself with the content? First off, I'm not really a fan of learning on the job. Basically, to me it seems that you go to the customer unprepared. You don't know what you're talking about, and to me it's one of the most uncomfortable things I can think of, like being in a customer meeting or having a customer looking over your shoulder while you're struggling to solve a problem. To me it sounds horrible. So I like to know what the requirements are, and always come prepared to a meeting. And because of that I like to keep teaching myself new features of Salesforce, new functionality, and work from there. So I never learn on the job, or try to never learn on the job. Instead I follow my own path, and that's the third line mostly. What I do is I first get some idea of the feature. It can be user group meetings like this, it can be reading the release notes, like the new features that are out, it can be the business user or the admin badges on Trailhead. That gives you kind of high level overview of the feature, but not really building it yet, so you get an idea, but it's just what's written about it. Then you get some applied knowledge, and I've separated that from practical knowledge. What I see as applied knowledge is start working with the feature, but not in a customer case. So you start doing Trailhead badges where you actually have to build a solution, super badges. You start with what's it called again? Your dev orgs, and you start playing around with features. That way you can get some feeling how to use them, best practices, some anti-practices, and it gives you an idea of how the feature works. But then comes the practical experience, and a couple of things that are introduced there are things like current architecture. Often a customer doesn't have one system, they have quite a few systems, and maybe a couple of them are replaced by Salesforce, but often a few of them stay and you have to integrate them. And that can change the requirements for your Salesforce solution. And there's also things like deadlines and budgets. So maybe the best practice solution from a purely hypothetical standpoint might not actually be the best solution for the customer. And that's where you get a very different kind of experience with features. And through that path, you can usually get at least 75, 80%, maybe even 95% of the knowledge about a feature. And only then would I say start studying for an exam. When I want to do an exam for a certification, I always identify the gaps first. So I want to know what are my gaps in my knowledge about this feature, about this functionality, about this subject. I usually do that with either Trailhead or knowledge checks from either third-party courses or maybe mock exams, stuff like that, to get an idea of what is asked from you on the exam. The study guide is a good starting point for that because that shows you all the subjects, but it's only like the highlights, the top level. So you have to dive down with knowledge checks and with mock exams to get an actual idea of what's missing. And from there you start studying, because if you study for everything, you're just going to say, already know this, already know that, already know that. And it's really not rewarding. You get bored so easily. And if you just focus on the gaps, you can progress much quicker, and it's much more rewarding and much more fun. And one thing I really like about Salesforce is that the community is huge. There's so many resources out there, so you don't have to study in a conventional method. Back at university, it was mostly lectures and books. And I kind of like the lectures, but they're not enough on their own, and I hated the books. Never did any assignments at home. I really like the projects, always fully dedicated to those, but I never did, almost never did any homework assignments from the books. I hated it. And with Salesforce, there's so many more resources out there. There's instructor-led classes, but there's also many third-party online video courses. There's Trailhead with a whole range of resources. It's just reading things with questions and building solutions, step-by-step trails, like the project badges in Trailhead, where you don't have to think up your own solution, but you're guided along a path to build it. And that way you can mix it up. You don't have to use one method to study, but you can use all of them and find out what works for you. And I'm a very lazy student, like I said. I don't like the books. So how I studied for most of it, after I've identified the gaps, is watch video courses. And I did that mostly from my bed. I just laid flat, watch a big screen, have a tablet or smartphone for the knowledge quizzes. And I watched the whole Friday evening, whole Saturday, whole Sunday, maybe even 30 hours in the weekend. But it's pretty low key. You can just watch a big screen and have someone tell you about the features. And then you do maybe a mock exam, find out what you're missing. And from there on you focus on the last bits with some active studying, some building and Trailhead. And by that way you can mix it up. You don't have to study in one way. And it makes it much easier and much rewarding for me. And like I said, practice everywhere. Everything you do is pretty much something that can be in Salesforce, either from an end user perspective or maybe a consumer of that system. So it can always give you context, especially as an architect and a consultant. So tools that I've used. First up, the study guide. When I think I want to go for this certification, I always start with a study guide, like what are the main subjects, what are the minor subjects of those. And very important with this one is that you always make sure you have the last version. Especially now, I find that a lot of the study guides are changing. Salesforce is changing a lot of the exams. I know Service Cloud certification changed quite a bit, Community Cloud as well. For instance, with Service Cloud, the industry knowledge went from 22% of the certification down to just 10%. So make sure you have the last version so that you know what you should focus on. The certification ebook, it's actually quite an old resource. I think they pretty much deprecated it, not sure. But it's like this one big PDF with all the certifications in there. and for each certification the resource you can use. Some learning paths, trail mixes, trailheads, instructor-led courses, some premium partner content. Like,
but are you going to share this slide?
Oh yeah, sorry, I'm going to share the slides as well. So you don't have to...
It's okay, I think it's better for me to memorize. Oh, memorize, okay.
But the other slides as well, don't worry. Another one I like is all the blogs out there. Miriam already mentioned Lazy Architects. The person who started the initiative, Gemma Emmett, has a blog, for instance, with it covers quite a few certifications, and especially designer ones. And they can tell you quite a bit of the things you should focus on and the caveats of an exam. For instance, like I said, the study guide might say that 10% is subject A, but the really difficult questions can be in subject B, and it helps a lot if someone else that took the exam can tell you focus on these points because they're always in the exam and they have the difficult questions. There's in one of the last slides there's quite a few out there, and they're really helpful to find out what the difficult questions in an exam are about. Well, mentioned quite often already, Trailhead. It's basically where every resource is brought to nowadays by Salesforce. They're deprecating most of the old resources and moving it all to Trailhead. So yeah, that's the place you want to go to for pretty much all the Salesforce provided resources. Trailmix, it's a part of Trailhead. What I like about Trailmix is that there's quite a few trail mixes out there that actually focus on one particular certification. Trailhead is the most badges, and the super badges are more feature focused, functionality focused, or maybe role focused. So you have admin badges in beginner, intermediate, advanced, same for developer, some business user badges, but they pretty much always focus on one piece of functionality, one feature, and the trail mix really prepares you for the certification, or at least the ones provided by Salesforce. You can also make your own trail mixes, so there's quite a few community trail mixes out there, but the ones provided by Salesforce are always for one particular certification. And also mentioned before, the third-party platforms. I personally like Udemy. There's quite a few great video courses on there, and they are pretty much always on discount. Standard price is like I think 200 euros or something, but they're always on discount for like 10 euros. And for that price, yeah, you can't go wrong. So when you know when you're ready, like I said, I never start studying before I'm familiar with at least 75% of the functionality. You don't want to start out completely blank. Sometimes you have to, like sometimes you have a project, an upcoming project for a customer. You already know you're going to use maybe some new functionalities not being out there for very long. Maybe Commerce Cloud or CPQ or something. And you haven't worked with that before. So then maybe you do have to study and work on that subject from scratch. But most of the time you can have already some experience with the subject, and you can start studying after that instead of before. Do mock exams, like I said, to identify the gaps. And what I also found is that the right amount of confidence is key. Back at university, I've had quite often that I did an exam and thought, well, did pretty much all right. I think it's going to be a 6, and then I got it back. Oh, shit, it's a 3 or 4 maybe, and failing grade. And when I started out with these Salesforce exams, I found that the questions are formulated in a way that's quite difficult to comprehend sometimes. And you really get used to it once you've done quite a few of the exams. But at first you think like, what are they asking? And it helps to get some confidence by that, and it really gets better once you do more certifications. But at the start, it's difficult to know after you hit the submit button, like, did I pass or not? Luckily you get the answer in a few seconds, but it helps if you already know that you're going to pass before you hit the button. And the right mindset can also make quite a big difference. If you're up to here in projects, working late nights because you have to make a deadline, it's probably not the right time to start studying for an exam. And there's no pressure to do it at that moment. Just wait for a couple of weeks, maybe a few months, and then try instead when you, more up to up to the task. So yeah, if you don't feel like it, probably a bad time to do it. Some tips about taking the exams itself. I always do them online because it offers you the opportunity to do them where you want, whenever you want. And I never schedule in advance. When you schedule in advance, like I said, you might not know 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month from now how your schedule is going to look like. Maybe you do have a deadline that you didn't know about. Maybe a project is going wrong or something's come up and you can't find the time. And yeah, then you already scheduled it, and yeah, once you start unscheduling it or postponing it, yeah, then you get on the path of pushing it away. But when you just don't plan it, I find that you actually do the exam when you're ready for it. It can bite you. A couple of times I wanted to do exams in particular weekends, like I thought, well, I'm going to study for this weekend, and Sunday evening or maybe in the Easter weekend, Monday evening I'm going to do the exam. Had that last year on the Monday morning of Easter holiday weekend. I wanted to do a certification exam for data architecture. And when I wanted to schedule on Sunday night, I found that the only slot available was at 5:15 in the morning. But I really wanted to pass, and I already told my colleagues, yeah, I'm going to do pass this data architecture this weekend, so by Tuesday I should have it. I thought, shit, yeah. Okay, I'll just schedule it, get up for 4:30 in the morning, did the exam, and it's actually quite far along with a couple of other certification preparation for designer certifications. So the same day I also did the sharing architecture, because I got up so early, I thought, well, a lot of day left, so I just... Yeah, I passed both. Yeah, like I said, 17 all on first attempt. So, but I don't recommend doing 2 designer certs on one day. It was quite a stressful and long day. As I said before, read carefully. The questions, especially on the more advanced exams, are quite long. Sometimes 4 or 5 lines. A lot of negations in there, a lot of sub-sentences. So make sure you understand the question. And make sure you understand the answers, because quite often there's questions with, let's say, A and B, A not B, not A and B, and you really have to know which one it is, and you can just guess because, well, they all look the same. You just have to know which one it is. And try to answer them first time right. Sounds a bit weird, but already gave this presentation last year, and back then I also said, don't progress to the next question by just clicking something. You can't hit the next button. Well, maybe now you can, but at least last year you couldn't hit the next button until you filled in at least one answer. Yeah. So you have to answer the question, but don't just click something to progress if you don't know it. Try to understand the question, try to understand the answers, and answer first time right. Because what I found, if you do answer it with just a guess, just a click, then you later have to convince yourself whether that answer is right or wrong. Because it might be the right answer, but you think, oh, I just randomly clicked it, probably wrong. And when you answer it first time right, you feel much more confident about your answer. Another one is review as you go. The review screen at the end of the exam is terrible. It's 60, 65 numbers with A, B, C next to it. Maybe an asterisk if you marked it for review. But that's it. You don't see the answers, you don't see the questions, and not sure if it still happens, but at least last year it sometimes happened that the answers shifted around when you went back to the question. So it used to be maybe with a 5 options where you select 3, it was A, C, and E, and you go back to it and suddenly B, D, E. And you think, I clicked something else. So it's confusing, and yeah, often you don't find the right answer then anyway. But sometimes one question can give you a hint about what the answer is to another question. Yeah, it might be a bit of cheating in some way that you don't know the answer and Salesforce is telling you themselves. But it can be helpful, and I always go back right away, then answer the question I was unsure about, and then go back to where I was. Another thing I found, especially with the designer exams, they can feel a little outdated sometimes. For instance, what's it called again? the deployment lifecycle and designer certification. That's all still focused on the old IDEs, old deployment tools, and doesn't have SFDX in it, which is like, okay, there's SFDX for quite some time now. It's gone through the pilot program, the open beta, and now at least most of it is GA, and it's not in the exam yet. It can take a couple of releases before something's in there, and you have to make sure that you know the old solution as well, because the new one might not always be in there yet. And a metaphor I've used for this before is you're thinking of transporting people from A to B, and you're thinking a bus, a car, something current, and the answer is carriage, because it doesn't exist yet. There's no car. So make sure you know the old solution as well, not just the new one. Some resource I've used for the studying. Like I said, first stop, Trailhead. It has a study guide on there. It has the badges, the super badges, information about certifications. Udemy, my personal favorite course platform, but there's quite a few other ones out there. Mentioned a few below. Pluralsight, Focus on Force, Certified on Demand, and the blogs. Like I mentioned, Gemma Emmett from Lazy Bee Architects has her own blog, Always a Blizzard, that covers quite a few of the certifications, at least all the designer ones, also the optional ones like Community Cloud. Ben McCarthy, I think he was an MVP, not sure anymore, and David Liu, they also cover quite a bit about certifications. So make sure you...
how many of them are like free, and how many of them we need to pay?
All the blogs are for free, Trailhead is free, and the course platforms are paid. But like I said, Udemy, it's usually 10 euros per course, so you can almost, it's almost ignorable. So I have a few slides after this one. I think there's some time left.
Are you guys fine? I think we are fine.
Yeah? Yeah. So I wasn't sure if I had time to cover them. But I also put some paths in there I think are worth following if you start out certifying. Already mentioned a bit before by Conan, and also by Miriam. Usually start out with administrator, but this is the path I would follow if you go for consultant, and most of it also for architect. A few ones put below here, like non-profit cloud consultants. Not that many people where it applies to. Field service lightning, the same thing. But especially the first 5 are also internally at Salesforce called the core 5. You pretty much always do those, especially if you go for architecture or consultancy. And these ones, the designer certifications, data architecture, sharing visibility designer, and platform developer 1, together with app builder, they make you application architect, which might sound very advanced for if you're going for consultancy and not for architecture, but I'd argue that it would help anybody to be an application architect, because you always have to work with data. There's always data in Salesforce, and it really helps you to know what the basis below the top level is, because there's quite a few going on at the lower layers of Salesforce that you cannot see, and it really helps you to know about them, especially if you work with very large organizations with objects in there with maybe a couple million or even tens of millions of records. Because if you don't know about that, then you usually can't work in the environment the way you're used to, because you'll run into all kinds of limits. Same goes for sharing visibility designer. There's usually not that many orgs that are completely open, and it really helps you to know more about how the sharing model works than the way it's discussed in the consultant certifications and administrator, because the sharing visibility designer goes much more in depth about how the sharing model works and what the caveats are and what the strengths are and all the options. And platform developer 1 is basically a a starting point for coding. Gives you an idea of when you want to use decorative solutions like the point and click functionality such as workflows, process builder and the lightning flows, or when you should really switch to code because of better performance or limits. And I'd say that all of these really help you in a consultant role and architect role, even if they might sound a bit advanced for a consultant position. Same goes for admin really, especially if you're an admin of a really large org. Not sure what all the companies are in the world that use Salesforce that are really large, but let's say you are at Coca-Cola and they do use Salesforce, I don't know, then there's probably going to be a lot of data in that org. And again, if you don't know about large data volumes or performance of sharing model in very large orgs, you're probably going to run into a lot of issues and limits. So it really helps you to know about that in that situation as well. Well, developer, you usually skip the consultant certifications because quite often you aren't customer facing, and you usually aren't designing the solution on top level. Mostly the lower layers, the detail levels of the solution. So you usually start out with App Builder because it gives you an idea of what's possible with the platform itself, with the point and click solutions. Then, like I said, platform dev 1 because it tells you when do I want to use the standard point and click solutions and when do I want to use code. And then platform developer 2 to learn more how to actually use code on the Salesforce platform. And then same thing again. And last, integration architecture, because customers nowadays, they don't just expect to use Salesforce, they want it integrated with all their other systems as well. And they don't just use one cloud, they use maybe 2, 3, 4 clouds. So you want to make sure that everything is working together as one big solution, one part of a whole architecture, and not just a silo of data. Even if it's a big silo with 3 or 4 clouds in there, it's still a silo if you consider it in the full architecture. So you want to know how to integrate. For marketing, well, you basically focus on the marketing certifications. But again, you want to know something about core as well. So administrator and app builder should give you some idea about the core platform, where App Cloud, Service Cloud, Sales Cloud are running on. Because you want to integrate probably between Marketing Cloud and Core, or between Pardot and Core, or maybe you use all 3. I know of a few companies that use both Marketing Cloud and Pardot. That was basically it. Oh, back to the Q&A.
And question and answer, I think Mariam and you can together do. If you guys have any questions, they can.
Yeah, sure.
Any of them can answer. So.
You have to stand though.
You have to stand. Anyone, any questions, sir?
For the architecture exams, do we really need a coding skills?
Do you need?
Is it necessary to get a coding skills for
the designer?
The design certifications aren't really about coding itself. They're more focused on the architecture. So like I said, with development you usually focus on the detail level design, and the architects focus on the top level design. So it designs the whole solution, mostly from a functional standpoint, but also how it integrates with other systems, and that usually it's limited to what APIs to use, and am I going to use a middleware, or am I going to integrate from the other system or from Salesforce. But it's usually the high level idea of the solution. And with development you focus on the detail solution. The architect says like, this is going to be the architecture, and you as a developer are going to build it. And he already gave you a framework, some enterprise integration architecture principles, and how he wants to build a trigger framework maybe. But you have to design it in detail. And usually you just focus on the platform 1, platform 2 then, and maybe also outside of Salesforce there's Heroku that supports the whole range of coding languages. So you don't have to stick with Apex, you can design Heroku in another language. And of course Lightning platform with Lightning components, especially now with Lightning web components. You can also work with your JavaScript knowledge, HTML, CSS on your Lightning components. So you usually don't focus as a developer on the architect certifications, but more on your development skills. But all the designer certifications help you as a developer because they help you design better scaling solutions on the platform and that are better integrated within the whole architecture. So you can do any of them, all of them, but I wouldn't say they are required as a developer, just very helpful.
You can easily relate how things are going behind.
Yeah, like I said, it's a very hidden module with Salesforce. You can see all the point and click functionality from the setup. You can see Apex, but there's a lot of stuff going on under the hood. Sometimes you do get to see it. I don't know if you guys know about the 7 dwarfs errors, but Salesforce is running on an Oracle database below, and there are a couple of Oracle errors you can get in very rare cases, and Salesforce has cut all of those and named them after 7 dwarfs from Snow White and the 7 dwarfs. So I think I got the grumpy error once. But yeah, sometimes you do get to see stuff from under the hood, and it's nice to know how that stuff under the hood works, even if you only see the top level like Apex and above in Salesforce itself.
But those courses tell you about all these things?
Designer are all trail mixes. There's hardly any courses out there for designer certifications, and there aren't any instructor-led trainings from Salesforce for any of those. They do have a new course, I think, for CTA review board preparation, but it's hidden from the course list. But there aren't for any of the designer certs. You have to do those by self-study with the trail mixes.
Why do you think there are not courses on those topics?
Come again?
Why do you think there are not courses on those topics?
Not sure really. Maybe Miriam can answer that more.
Okay.
You're from Salesforce?
Yeah.
The designer.
Yeah, no, there aren't any, but I'm not sure why.
Yeah, safe harbor. I don't know. I have no idea.
Maybe they are new, and that's why it's not.
No, CTA has been around from the start, and never been any course, but not sure why.
I think it has to do with.
It's expensive exam and nobody.
Yeah,
I think it requires a level of maturity to do that in terms of platform knowledge that also expects you to be able to do your own learning and your own studying. So that's what I think.
it might have to do as well with your background. Like if you go for CTA, you usually have extensive experience with the platform, but there's so many backgrounds you can come from when growing to CTA. And I already had this issue when I did the app builder course. There's only 2 courses I followed. The admin course in my second week with Salesforce, and the app builder course, I think when I was working for 3 or 4 months with Salesforce. And already app builder, I thought, well, I know this already. So I finished the course book on the morning of day 3. And the last 2.5 days, I just focused on the stuff I found interesting and asked everything I wanted to know from the instructor. So I think I asked like 50% of the questions from the whole class, at least. And yeah, when you get to CTA, you're so advanced within the Salesforce ecosystem that you probably know most of it already, especially if you're already preparing for the review board. And the gaps that you have will be different for everybody. So it probably won't make sense to have a course because most people will already know pretty much all of it and will be bored through the entire session. Another thing might be cost of the course versus return on investment. Like architects are.
About 4 or 5 days is 4,500.
Yeah, but not even that. It's you have to take the complete cost into account. Many of the advanced courses aren't given in the Netherlands, so you might have to travel to London or Berlin or Paris or something.
Yeah.
So you have to take into account your flights, your hotel, your expenses over there, and also your missed revenue over here because you're not billable, you're not working, and architects are expensive. So the whole thing might cost 20k, 30k if you take a course for a week, and if it's not profitable because you already know most of it, then probably a better solution to just work on it in your own time or by yourself and use the trail mixes or other self-study resources. So I think that might be one of the reasons why there's no courses for the designer or architect certifications, because, well, you already know most of it.
So any other question? Oh, we're good. Thank you so much, guys.
You're welcome.
You still have to stand up.